Hello, and thank you for contacting Wave Support. I see from your clinical request that your patient is trying rigid lenses for the first time, coming from soft lenses, and you're struggling with fit as well as vision. Well, as you know, with these multifocal lenses, we got to get the fit down before we can get the vision. So let's take a look at the designs. I know you're concerned about going with G-SIM versus R-SIM. And if we look at this design, this is actually not a bad looking topography. It's actually pretty nice overall. But the biggest thing you'll notice, even though this looks pretty symmetrical, you'll notice that it's kind of off center. So it's probably happening that very nicely designed lens that you have is probably just trying to follow this contour. It's going to decenter off to the side. And where that comes from, if you remember, a G-SIM lens tries to average out over the entire meridian. So if it looks at this particular meridian, it's going to have some trouble averaging out this flatter area with this smaller flat area, the steeper area over here. So once it averages that out, it's going to have the numbers are going to be a little skewed, and then if we go in the other direction, they'd be skewed a little bit more. You hit a steep zone right over there. So when you do this, you'll get a lens that looks going to look a little funny on this cornea, and that's probably contributing to the difficulty you're having. Now, in theory, you could go to an R-SIM design as you had thought and just try to go right over that area and set it on this spot. And that might not even be a bad idea if you go to more of a mini-scleral or semi-scleral design. But I might be inclined to say go the opposite way, go more for a G-SIM design, because that way you can look at this lens and Wave will look at each meridian and adjust for the topography here to account for this larger flattening area. And then over here, it'll adjust over here. So that way the lens will be more centered and more closely match this. So I showed a little example of that for you. If we go back over here to your regular design here, let me bring it back up. This, I believe, is your original design. So if we look at the overall lens, this actually looks pretty good. But you'll see you've got a lot of areas, a lot of variation in that peripheral cornea according to this makeshift or the fluorescein representation here. If you go down to the bottom, if you recall, this bottom right is where Wave interprets the topography, and that's what it brings into Wave. And this is the theoretical back surface of the contact lens. So if you really want a nicely centered lens, you really want to get this back surface of the lens to try to match this cornea as closely as you can, and that will give this lens a better chance of centering on here. And so by doing that, if you click over to R-SIM, you're still going to run into some issues with that fit. But if you click over to a freeform design, and I actually mocked up one here for you, this is the same lens. I just clicked it over to freeform, and what you'll notice now, you got a lens that very closely matches this cornea. Now, another thing to think about, axial, a lot of docs design in axial. If you remember, axial tends to represent the central part of the cornea very closely and not as precisely in the peripheral part of the cornea, whereas tangential tends to look a little bit more precisely at this peripheral cornea and not the central part. So the end result is tangential lenses have a nice tendency to lie very nicely out here in this peripheral cornea, and they tend to be slightly flatter than the axial designs. So in this particular one, what I did originally was I mocked this lens up using just the tangential mode. And we'll give the Wave a moment here to calculate. So we get a lens that's pretty well aligned if you look through those areas. And remember that green line is your cornea, so you get a pretty good alignment. And in this particular case, I use this little aspheric tool down here. I just clicked in just a hint of that and redesigned the lens. And you could actually do this probably in axial or tangential, but what you'll notice now is this back surface lens very closely matches this cornea. And if we get up here, if we go right around the clock dial here, you'll notice that we get a very nicely aligned lens with the cornea. I might increase that edge lift a little bit, make sure you have some good tear clearance. And what I notice a lot of these lenses, if you're going to go from a soft to rigid, you really want to get a nicely fit back surface because these patients are used to a soft lens that's so malleable on the cornea. As far as the bifocal, I think if you get the fit down, you'll get a lens that centers better. Looks like you get a good size of the pupil zone here. And just like any distance center near peripheral lens, translating lens, it's hard to get really, really great near vision. So some docs are successful using a near center. I know you're asking about that. Center near lenses can work well. They have the same types of limitations as, say, an Air Optics soft lens or a ProClear near design. They have a tendency to blur up the distance a little bit, but certainly if you need that near vision, Some docs will even use a modified monovision with this near center going into the non-dominant eye, and etc. So, I think they'll try that, but I'd work on the design first to see if I get the fit down. Same thing on the other eye. The left eye is even more dramatic here. If you look here, here's the center part of the cornea, but you notice this whole corneal area is sort of displaced over here to the right a little bit. So if we look at uh, your original designs, and these are very nicely done, but I would I would say, well, let's try to get this lens to match that cornea more specifically. Since we're a little bit decentered, I'd probably go to a freeform just to see if I can bring it back in. And now, lo and behold, I got a freeform design, and you'll notice that that lens very nicely follows the contour, that green contour line of the cornea. We've got a back surface of the lens that looks very similar to the front surface, and so I would anticipate, or I'd expect this lens to center more nicely, more correctly, if you will, and it'll give you a better chance of getting that optical zone center over the pupil. So with that said, I think those little adjustments should get you back on track a little bit more. Now ultimately, if you have trouble, if you run into comfort issues, a lot of these soft lens wearers have done remarkably well with a mini scleral lens going up to about 14 millimeters or so. If you go that route, there's a really neat tutorial on the Wave website. I'll include a link on how to design a mini scleral lens using a 8-point or 8-step process. And a lot of times, if you do decide to go into a mini scleral lens, you almost have to go with a near reading zone, just because the lenses don't translocate very well. So with that said, I wish you well with this case, and thank you for contacting Wave Support. Have a great day.